Hey everybody, this is going to be a video on getting you started with MidJourney and a bit on Discord. Currently, you can only activate or use MidJourney through Discord. There's a website, but the website allows you to only view kind of what you've created. You can't actually use the service through there. Now, a lot of that is in the works, and I'm sure that there are beta versions of the web interface out. But right now you must use Discord. So Discord is a platform used for voice chatting. It was originally used for gaming. It still is substantially used for gaming, and it's a pretty cool platform unto itself. So if you have a group of friends you interact with often, Discord is a wonderful way to do so. It is also very easy to code for. So if you have an application and you'd like to have an interface but don't want to deal with having a bunch of web designers on staff, creating a Discord bot is what they're called is actually a lot easier to do, which is where MidJourney kind of came about. There's a lot of great capability built into Discord, and since it's a free application, there's no reason not to leverage that. So to get started, we're going to briefly talk about the fact that you own the assets you create in here if you are a paid subscriber. And if we look here, it says subject to license above, you own all the assets you create with this service. Now that means, if you look at above, it just basically means that MidJourney is allowed to use the images you create for marketing and so on. This is no different than pretty much any other platform you can use. If you make something amazing and then want to use it for advertising, then you're granting them the license to do so. There's also a private version of this that's an additional $20 a month. Again, the pricing may change, but right now it's $20 a month, and that gives you the private version, which means that no one will see the prompts you create. We're going to be looking through this and discussing in a bit about the visibility of the prompts you create, the art you create. So just understand that there is a private mode as well. Now, if you are using these in a sellable situation and your company makes more than $1 million in gross revenue a year, you're going to have to pay an additional, I believe it's $600 a year to allow for their corporate plan. But that's pretty reasonable if you're making over $1 million and you're thinking you can make a lot of money with the art you have here. Then that is a drop in the bucket. Okay, so basically, this is the Discord here. So if you're on MidJourney Discord, you see there's all these rooms. You may not have access to all of them initially. You have to subscribe to get access to some of them. And you're going to notice that some of them also have like special clubs. Once you pass 1,000, then you'll see that these come in here. I myself, around 2,500 or 2,600 images I've created in MidJourney so far. And I think the next unlock is around 5,000 or so. I have no idea. You simply click on a room to switch to it. If it starts with a pound sign, it means it is a text-only room. Some of them, like this one, for example, you're not allowed to post in because it is an official channel. But you get down here, you see there's some newbie rooms, for example. This has newcomer information, so people are typing in here and creating their own prompts. There's also support for trial and, again, members. There's a $10 membership currently, and I would not recommend that one because you're going to roar through it in about 2 seconds. And then there's a $30 a month membership. And we're going to talk about that. There are two modes inside of MidJourney. There's Fast, which the $10 a month membership only works with Fast, and you only get so many images. And once you're done with that, then you have to wait till next month. Then for $30 a month, there's a Relaxed mode. That mode is awesome because they don't count, the images don't count against your totals. So you can basically work forever. Now, supposedly, it's supposed to take a little bit longer to generate those, but I've never really noticed it being a big deal. Now, you may get lost as there's over 1 million users on this specific Discord server alone. These are your different servers over here, by the way. I have my own server with its own MidJourney room as well. So if you choose something a little bit quieter, it's also available. There's a link in the description. But you can do it anywhere. It doesn't really matter. They're all going to be on the same service or subscription level. But as you make images in here, you're going to notice several hundred are created in a minute. You're going to get lost. I highly recommend you see this inbox icon up here. And up here, you'll be able to say that only things where you see that you're mentioned. And this will work across any server over here. You're going to see it up here. And then, of course, ones that are unread. So as you're creating art in any channel on MidJourney, you will benefit from using this inbox to kind of see what's going on. If you're totally done with the crowd, you don't have to create your own MidJourney server so that you're the only one on it. You can simply right-click on the MidJourney bot and say that you'd like to message it. This will open a direct message with the MidJourney bot, and here you can talk to it, and you're the only one talking to it. So it's nice and quiet, and you can get your work done alone. This may be restricted to people who have a certain subscription level, but at this time, I believe it's open to everybody. But that's the hard part about using the interface. Now let's talk about actually using MidJourney. So MidJourney has a lot of commands that are available through the / which is, again, part of the Discord benefit. The biggest one you want to start with is settings. So if we just type part of the word settings and hit enter, it'll type the rest of the word. And we can hit settings. and it will show you what you're using. You can see that I'm currently using relax mode. I pay $30 a month for relax mode. That means I basically have unlimited imagery. Start at the top here. There are 3 versions of MidJourney available currently. The third one is the best one so far. There's also a test version and a photo test version. Now, we are going to be using these, but we're not going to switch them on in here, because if we switch them on in here, then some of these other settings argue with it, and then we're going to end up throwing errors. So it's just best to not check these at this time. We also leave the style at medium. You can affect this later. Quality is a base quality. If you up the quality, that means that you may indeed end up spending 2 or 3 image credits per image. So this is still kind of up in the air as to how they're billing for this. But I just leave it at base quality because that's plenty good. And we can also upscale it at any time. Speaking of upscaling, there's 3 different modes of that. There's regular upscale, which adds more detail as it upscales. The light upscale, which doesn't add a lot more detail, but still does as it makes the image larger. And then beta upscale, which I really don't care for personally, which adds even less detail and makes the image bigger. So you have 3 different methods, but I think regular upscale is the most interesting. For $20 more a month, you can move to private mode, which means that your prompts and all of the art you create is not visible to anyone else. Otherwise, it can all be viewed. Remix mode is brand new and allows you to take a prompt you're currently working on and to make minor adjustments to it. This is actually really refreshing and was not available until about a week or so ago, in which case you would just have to re-roll your prompt completely. Let's say you did a picture of a rabbit and you wanted to put a hat on that rabbit. You would get a completely different image of a rabbit with a hat. Now you can kind of hopefully add that hat to the existing image, and it kind of does a nice job of putting that together. Again, this is still experimental, but it's a lot better than it used to be. Then there's fast mode. Again, you're limited to the number of images you can create in a given month, depending on your subscription level. Even at the $30 a month one, you're still limited. And then relaxed mode is basically unlimited. To find out where you are, you can do another /info and then hit enter again. This will tell you where you are in the food chain of how much imagery you have left in a given month. You see that I'm using this standard subscription model, which is $30 a month. I'm currently in relaxed mode. I have 15 hours of image generation. I have used none of it. I'm working in private mode, which means, again, no one sees my stuff. That's an additional $20 a month. Again, this pricing is probably going to change over time, but this is currently what it is. So I've currently made about 2,700 images for about 50 hours of time. And my relaxed usage is also getting up there. Now, because I'm using it in relaxed mode, that means that this fast time will always remain here. Again, I don't notice a huge difference. So to me, the $30 subscription makes the most sense. And metered usage, I'm not really even sure what that is. I have no jobs currently queued, and I'm not running any jobs. If you're wondering if you have something stuck out there that hasn't responded yet, because again, relaxed mode at certain times can actually lead to a couple minutes per generation, this will tell you how things are going. To get started, you're going to use the imagine command. So /I, and you're going to see a list of the commands that start with I, and we're going to use imagine. Imagine comes with a thing called prompt, and it's asking you for what are you imagining? And this is the entire core behind how MidJourney works. Now, there's basically 3 different areas that we're going to talk about. One is the actual terms itself, and one is the switches that you can use, and then the remixing of the modes. Let's use the example I just brought up, a rabbit in a hat. It's that simple. Type that, and it will go into the queue and wait for it to start. And again, depending on traffic, we are in relaxed mode, you can see here. This may be a while. While that's working, let's talk briefly about the MidJourney website. So if you go to the website and you sign in, it's going to log you in using your Discord credentials, and you're going to see all of the work that you've ever created. Now, this can be filtered. As you can see here, mine is filtered, and it shows the total number of jobs, and you can see the work that I've worked on recently. If you hover over one, you can see the exact prompt that was used. You can even click on this dots here and say, I want to go copy this prompt or open it in Discord. You just heard that chime, hopefully. That means that Discord is telling me I have a new message. That means that my images are now done. But if I can open this in Discord, that'll take me to that prompt, and we can do other operations, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then if I want to publish this, that means that everyone else in the world can see it. Now, there are other core areas over here. One of the coolest ones is the community feed. If you click on that, it's going to show you all of the things that other people are creating. One of the things about MidJourney is the prompts are public. So if I hover over this, I can see the prompt. I can go down to this and then copy the prompt if I'd like, or open it in Discord, and it'll take me to this person's feed of where they had created this image, and I can do variations and upscales. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And then you can also follow this user. If you think they're creating great work and you'd like to see a continuous feed of what they're doing, then you can do so. Down here, you can also rate the images from icky to awesome. And if you rate enough of these, then you will get free hours of image generation. So if you're on a $10 a month plan, it benefits you to come in and actually rate these. And there is a rating capability right here. If you click on this thumbs up, you're allowed to go in here and then rate random images that have been generated by the community. And again, you're rewarded by that. This is a great place to get inspiration. So if we go back, we see that we're given 4 images. This is the standard way that MidJourney works, is it gives you 4 images, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you have the ability to upscale them. So it starts with the U, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we want to see this one larger, we would click on upscale 4, for example. But if we find one we really like, kind of, and we're like, that's really interesting, I'd like to see other variations of that. That's what the V's are for. So 1, 2, this is the third one. I like this one. Let's look at variations of the third one. Now, back when we had the settings up, you saw that I had remix selected. And I talked about the fact we could add other things to the prompt. That's what this is. It's bringing up and saying, do I want to make any changes to this prompt? At this time, I'm not going to. I'm just going to go ahead and hit submit. Now, because we don't have any other requirements at this point, according to aspect ratios, like we don't like to square or things like that, we're going to get 4 images. You'll notice later as we kind of hone in on a specific area or look that we may be limited in how many images we get back. And there we go. We see our rabbit. And if we like one, we can continue this by continuing to add variations or V-rolls, as they call these. So you can just continue to V-roll it. If you don't like any of the 4 images you were given, you can also use the re-roll button, which I actually really like. Using this, you can just set up another re-roll and see what's going to come out. You can have more than one job at a time as well. So if you're like, I really like that, but I think this image is interesting too, let's go ahead and look at variations of that one. You can have more than one thing going at a time. Again, I'm not going to alter the prompts. I'm just going to go ahead and let them run as they are. But you notice down here that we have 2 jobs running. So if we do the info command, like we talked about earlier, we can now see that we have no jobs in the queue, 1 job running, and another job running. We can jump to those jobs, clicking the jump button. As the jobs finish, they'll drop to the bottom here, and there'll be this tan color letting you know that they're new. So we can see now we have new variations of this rabbit. So while that's cooking, let's talk about how to actually make prompts. And this is an entire series or entire strategy behind how to do things in MidJourney. This is the entire reason you're here. And making prompts, or prompt engineering as it's called, is an actual thing. Now, inside of the AI universe, prompt engineering is very serious. And inside of MidJourney, it's so much more lighthearted. But again, just as serious when you get down to how to make the best prompts. And that's one of the reasons I like my private mode, is because I think I'm pretty good at it. I have somewhat of a knack for coming up with the conditions and mixes I really enjoy that a lot of people are like, how did you do that? And that's the one thing I'm holding to the vest. So again, it all bakes down to using this imagined prompt. So a rabbit in a hat. Now, so far this is somewhat interesting, but not amazing. If you want cute rabbit images, that's great. But we can continue to do this, and we can continue to add complications to this. But at a certain point, you're going to confuse the AI behind the system. So you don't want to go overboard, but you do want to get it as interesting as you can. Be prepared to get something you're not expecting. You're not going to get an image that you want. You're going to get something unexpected. Just keep that in mind. If you already know exactly the image you want, I suggest you pick up a paintbrush and actually attempt to make it versus just rolling this. This is more of an idea engine for me. It kind of skips the sketching phase. That's kind of the way that I look at it. To me, these are not finished pieces of art. I want to make them my own, but you do you. But in this case, let's say we like this rabbit, but we also like a specific artist. You can use by and then give it the name of an artist. Let's use Alphonse Mucha. Now, if you're not sure and you'd like to see a list of artists, I maintain one on my website. I'll put a link down below where you can see different lists of artists that might be worthwhile, and you can mix them together. You can use commas, you can use the word and, you can do anything like that. So I'm going to use these 2 artists. Now it's going to mix their styles together. So at the end, I'm going to come up with something that doesn't look like either one. So in a way, I'm kind of inventing my own artist. One thing to keep in mind as you're creating prompts is they are in order of importance. Everything on the left is more important than everything on the right. So typically I break my prompt into 2 or 3 areas. One is what it is that I'm taking a picture of or drawing a picture of, the artists that are involved, and then any switches, which will come at the end, we'll talk about in a moment. Now you're going to notice that a person is appearing in this image, and that's because Seb McKinnon also draws people, as does Alphonse Mucha. So we are coming up with a combination of artists, and we're getting elements from those artists because of who they are. If we want a rabbit that is only a rabbit with no people, that's a lot more complicated, typically, but not impossible. You use Control Z, which is usually undo, it will bring up the last prompt, because in a way we are undoing. We're saying, hey, bring back the last thing I typed. What you can do here is you can use -- is a command. All commands start with -- and then we can use no, and we can use people. Now, this may or may not work because my choice of artist, but depending on what I'm facing, I may be able to remove ancillary images or ancillary items from an image by using this switch. There are some situations where certain switches like this work or don't work depending on other switches. And we'll get to that complication in a bit. But note that this no switch tends to work pretty well for removing things from an image, but not all the time. Again, it really depends on the artist you've selected. As you see, it's having a heck of a time trying to draw something from two artists that draw people without putting a person in the shot. We've kind of created a HAL 9000 situation here where it's probably going to eject us all into space. But if I go back up here and I find one that I enjoy, again, I can continue to scale it. Like this one, for example, I like this one. I'm going to V-roll that one. It's going to pop up and say, is there anything else I'd like to do with this? A rabbit in a hat. Well, since it's not really a rabbit, let's go ahead and make it a woman and see if it can maybe add some additional details to her. Remember, everything is in order of importance from left to right. The interesting thing about MidJourney is that you can also create prompts from things that don't really have a picture, or they're more of a feeling. Here, we'll use a really depressing phrase to start this out. And you can use adjectives. You can use really any mix of things. Again, artists mixing those things in can also create some really awesome imagery. Well, this is working on. Let's talk about another few common things that get added. So after my primary item, or the primary thing I'm creating, I tend to add other directives. One of my favorites is highly detailed. That means that the bot is going to take time to add additional details, perhaps, to things. You'll have to understand that you're really talking to a bot, a computer, and it's trying to make sure that it has done pretty much everything you've asked for in one way or another. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to get everything right, but it also means that it may cut corners. For example, you've asked for a portrait of a beautiful woman. It may decide to render her with no arms because you didn't say she needed to have arms. So it gets into this weird situation of, did you ask for it to have arms? Is she holding something? So you can use different terms to try and get around different problems you're facing. But if the prompt gets too long, you're going to find the imagery tends to get farther and farther away from what you're doing. These things are called tokens, and we can only have so many tokens in a given prompt. And if we get too many tokens, it just starts to confuse the bot. So try and keep your terms as terse as possible. For example, I'll see someone say highly detailed, and then you'll see extreme detail right afterwards. These are the exact same prompts. There's no reason for you to pick both of those and put them in there. You may also see other things like 4K or 8K, and you may see them in the same thing. This has to do more with the look of what an 8K or a 4K resolution image looks like, and not the fact you're going to actually get a 4K or 8K image. It's just how they look. You're going to see other looks too, like oil painting while on canvas. You may see watercolor. You may also see things like Octane Render. This is a rendering application used in a lot of commercial games and so on. It just has a look. So kind of think of it like an artist, not so much that you're asking for Octane to actually render it. This also applies to Unreal Engine, which is a gaming engine, again, that does a really nice job. There's also CryEngine. So depending on what you ask for to be used here, you're going to get a little bit different look. We'll go up here, we can see the 4 we've generated. If you click on an image, it'll give you the bigger one. You can see it kind of ran out of ideas here and started putting text in it. It doesn't do a very good job with text, so good luck if you're trying to get text printed on the thing. But some of these are really interesting. It's like, I really like this top one here. So let's go ahead and upscale that one. This is our first upscale. Now, when you upscale, it will not ask you for additional information about the prompt. It's simply going to upscale it, versus when you clicked on V to get additional versions. And again, the upscale is working now. We can see our other one here. And Crisis is the name of the game, and they invented their own engine, which is why this is called a CryEngine. There we go. It is done. I can click on it, and I can see what I'm getting. Now, let's say that I really enjoy this image, but I really don't want it square. Or I really enjoy this one, which I actually really do. and I don't want it square, but I also want a lot more detail and I want to upscale it. This is where we can get into some additional flags. So if we re-roll this one and it asks us, what would you like to do with this image? We're going to add an additional flag at the end. Now all flags start with dash dash. AR means aspect ratio, and then it's width and height separated by a colon. So width would be 3:2. This would be a landscape image. 2:3 would be a portrait image. So here we see variations of that image that we had up, and you see that they are now aspect ratio of 2:3, same as my Sony a7R4, for example. So if you're looking to mix this with your photography, it's probably a good idea to come up with the same aspect ratio. There we go. We look at these. It does have issues with fingers. It does have issues with faces. It does have issues with extra limbs. Just be aware that's kind of a limitation of the technology today. It has nothing to do with your prompt. Okay, so let's look at upscaling this one, which I really like. But I'm going to, again, make an additional request to this. So we've used aspect ratio 2:3. There's currently one called test, and there's one called test P. Both have different looks to them, which is why they're currently in testing. This prompt has been around for a while now, and I'm sure they're going to change it to a different term, but at this point, it's known as test and test P. Each of them give a different look. So if we do one with test, hit again, do another one with test P is more photographic, or at least that's the intention. Okay, and our first one is done. We're going to look at what it is. So this was just with test. Now, because the CryEngine tends to look pretty photographic to begin with, these don't have a real illustrative look to them. But depending on the engine you're using, you may get a completely different look. And then we have this one with this test P. Now, both of these have a pretty aggressive depth of field, meaning that they're blurry in the background and in the foreground. Again, that is a combination of these two terms here. For example, if we decide to remix this one with variation, but this time instead of CryEngine, we can do watercolor. Now, watercolor and test P are going to argue with each other because test P is photographic and watercolor is obviously more artistic. But the combination of these might be interesting. But for the sake of this, I'm going to remove the P and just run with test. Sometimes it's these unwitting combinations of things that make the art really interesting. Okay, and it's done. If we click on it to view it, you see it. It doesn't really look much like a watercolor, although I do like it. Why doesn't it look like a watercolor? One of the reasons is that once we start introducing aspect ratios to it, our changes that happen when we request the remix of the prompt isn't as effective. So if we want to do this, I think I would do is just drop it all the way back down with no flags afterward, meaning we'll generate 4 versions, just like we did originally. So now when we start it over again, you can see now it really looks like a watercolor. So what I would recommend is that you start in this mode, get to an image that you think is pretty much perfect, and then begin the operation of trying to perfect it by remixing it using the V-rolls at the bottom and then changing the prompt. In the upscaling process, the one we really like, and it's going to make it larger, resolution-wise, and then continue to add detail to it. As you're working, you can go back to your MidJourney website, and you'll see that, sure enough, all the prompts that you've done and all the images you've created are here. And you may save them, you may add them to collections and other things. So you can always download your information directly from here as well by using Save Image. Once you have one fully upsized, you can continue to rate it, make variations, which is what we've been doing, upscale it to max, which will add a lot more detail. Again, upscale light version, which won't add as much of that MidJourney look to it, but will attempt to make it much larger resolution. And then the beta upscale, as I said, I really don't care for this one, makes it even less detail, but again, large. So you can get a couple thousand pixels on the long edge by continuously upscaling. We only have one upscale left, and that's the upscale to max. And then we have the new remaster, which again is kind of a give it another shot using the current technology. As MidJourney changes over time, the workflows, the models, and what's called the checkpoints behind there do change as well. Now, MidJourney runs on top of Stable Diffusion. So if you haven't heard of that product, that is a free product, and MidJourney has made their version of it. So that is really what we're looking at. If you click on Upscale to Max, you're going to notice there's an error, and it is that you must use your fast hours in order to upscale to max. This is so people don't abuse the system. You just type /fast, enter it, upscale to max, back down, and then go back into relax mode. That way you don't forget and waste all of your fast hours. I have no trouble ending the month with a lot of fast hours left, but each person to their own. The wonderful thing about MidJourney is being able to really kind of come up with whatever strikes you and try it out. There's no harm in just giving it a whirl and seeing what happens. I use the off the shoulder of Orion for all of you Blade Runner fans out there. In fact, as you're working with things, you'll find that prompts that have certain visual appeals or visual looks are best used here. For example, Blade Runner is the movie I was referencing, and Blade Runner has a look. It's kind of a cyberpunk neon type of look. So by using the word Blade Runner, it's going to know, oh, that's what that movie looked like. That's the look I should add to this. The same with like cyberpunk or steampunk or anything along that lines. In fact, there's a whole joke about putting the word punk after pretty much every word in the English language and seeing what happens. This image is done. We can now click on it. Third one. Or I oftentimes just click variations just for once. Again, I have no changes. In fact, let's use test P on it. See what we get. I'm a big fan of using the variation button before I commit to upscaling something, because you never know. We have a Death Star in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and upscale this one. And there we go. It's done. So if we click on it, we can see that it's added all this additional detail. And this crunchiness is a very MidJourney look. If we don't want that, we can try upscaling with light upscale. We can also try the beta. If we want to upscale to max, again, it's going to error and also put it into fast mode first. For convenience, I wish they would just make it so that it automatically worked in fast mode, but they don't. Now we just have to wait for them to be done. Okay, so now that that's done, let's take a look at each one of them. So let's start out with the full size max. This is the max resolution version. And you can see the amount of detail that has been added in here. This is a very MidJourney-like look. This is the kind of thing that MidJourney does. That's the full size version. It's 1600 by 1600 pixels. Now we also asked for the light upscale redo. This is called the detailed upscale. This is the max for detailed upscale redo. This is the light upscale redo, and you can see it is a bit smaller. So instead of 1600 pixels, it is 1000 pixels. But you can see the level of detail is a lot more reasonable. It's not as crunchy. Sometimes I like to combine these two in Photoshop so I can kind of get the best of both worlds in different areas of the image. Finally is the new beta upscale redo. This one is larger at 1048, but we can see from the detail level that is a lot more reserved, going for mainly the larger forms. So it isn't too bad, but again, I would probably combine this with the others to create kind of the best of both worlds, or the best of all three worlds in Photoshop. Anyway, that's the basics of MidJourney. Again, enjoy it. It's art creation for you. And again, you can take this and use it as a point of departure. For me, it's kind of skipping the sketching phase or making it smaller so that I get my ideas in place and then kind of work with the image from that point forward. I don't consider these finished works of art. At least in my mind, they aren't. All I did was work on a prompt to come up with something, but again, is unique to me, and no one else has these images, nor will they, because these are marked as private. And again, this is my words, my noise to make it all work. So everybody, that's what I got. If you got questions or comments, throw them in the comments below. And good luck and have fun.